Howdy y'all, we got the Bulldog on the channel. We got another one of these vehicles here. Now you can see the new U-bolts that I just put on. This is not the red pickup that I did my last video on, but I'm doing everything the same on this thing. We had to put all new exhaust on it because we had some sticky finger people locally here, and there wasn't a whole lot left. I ended up having to put the exhaust clear back behind the muffler. But while I was doing that, I noticed something. The U-bolts were about gone, just like everything else. So we called the customer, and since we'd already done one just recently, we just gave them that price because this one also needs brake lines. You can see where this is all wet. Brake line's leaking right here. Now, this one had not broke anything here yet, so the brake line was just leaking. We noticed a soft pedal when we pulled it in. But I'm going to show you an easier way to do this stuff. First off, when you're working with this old stuff, don't bother to try to put your flare wrench on that. Just reach in there and cut it off with your side cutters. Do the same thing over here. Now, take your whole line out. With as rusted as this one is, I'm not going to try to save the nuts. I'm just going to use new ones. We've got them on hand. They're not that much. Better just take care of it. We've already broke the bleeders loose on this, so we know that we don't have to do wheel cylinders. But I've got this line here, and I haven't bent anything. So I'm going to go ahead and flare my nuts on and pattern it off of this one and have it ready before I even take those nuts off. Whenever you cut this thing off with your side cutters, not only does that make it to where you can put a socket on it and not worry about rounding it off, but it pinches it off tight so you're not losing fluid while you're doing all your line making. So we'll get after that. Now here's our kit that we bought from a local independent. There's the number of it, it's AGS. So it should be available about everywhere and probably online too. If you do a lot of these, it's nice to have, you know, most of what we have. We had some empty holes here, there, and yonder, so we put our 1/4 inch stuff in it as well, instead of buying a whole 1/4 inch set. We had a whole bunch of stuff that we used to use quite often. We don't use it much anymore because those old Chevy trucks, they have a kit available and you have to replace all the lines anyway, so we ended up where we don't need as many fittings. We haven't used them in years. But I've got plenty of 3/16 flare nuts to use. So I'm gonna put you on time lapse and we're gonna get after making a new line. Now, with this kit sitting here like this, I just grabbed a union out of here and screwed it on the end of this to make sure that I got my flare the right size. If you make it too big, it won't go up into the threads on the union. So it's good to double check yourself before you get everything all done and then realize, I screwed up. Now, if you notice, when I was doing the time lapse, I did not make this final bend. I rolled this out to where I had a good idea of where I was going to be and left it long, put my nut on there, flared it, and then bent the end because that takes a little bit of length You have to be straight for a little bit in order to get this flare on there good. Now, you don't have to be exact. You just have to be pretty close. This is pliable. As you saw, I just bent it with my thumbs. Of course, you know, my pinkies are the size of most people's thumbs, so I have a little bit of a wide area to bend it with. And this green line bends pretty good too. 1/4 inch, not so much. Also, taking this line out like this, you just set it off to the side, and you have a place to measure how many inches of line you used, because when you're buying it in bulk like this, you want to keep track of that and charge for it according to how much you use. Way cheaper than buying sticks of line that are never the right length. Now this nut will either be a 14 millimeter or a 9/16, one of the two. That's stock. So you get both of them. That way you know you have the right one, because if you don't, you'll have the wrong one. Get your 6-point socket on there. Pop it loose. Okay, it's decided not to focus. There we go. Yeah, don't focus while I'm moving. That's fine. Now, we're gonna go ahead and put this line on here, and this is gonna be the dry side. Focus. What are you focusing on? It's pinched off on the side that's going to have fluid behind it, so we're doing the dry side first. I expect it's not going to want to screw in. Come on. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. It's okay if it goes a little bit stiff, but if it continues getting harder, you got to stop and make sure you're not cross-threaded. I usually run it down until it's close, and then I use a flare nut wrench to tighten it. Now hold on the line so don't try to twist it while you tighten. And especially if you've just done a flare, you want to crank them down pretty good. Because that flare is not going to be perfect. Oh, there we go. Now, check your line and make sure it's not going to be touching anything or rattling on anything. That'll wear a hole in it. Like I say, you don't have to be perfect when you bend it, but because it's pliable, you'll move it around later. Now let's do the other end. I'm just wiggling it around and it keeps screwing in there, so we're good. Take your regular open end and run it down close. And tighten it with your flare nut wrench. I always like to hold on to the hose and everything while I'm doing that. Okay. Now, kind of move everything around. Make sure it's not going to vibrate. And we're done. Now the clips that hold it in place are rusted out. It's only got kind of one left. There's not much here. Everything else is gone. But that's all there is to it. Brake lines are fairly easy. Bleeding them, you just kind of got to know what you're doing. But anyway, that's the quick little tutorial on just bending and flaring. It's not really all that bad. There's a little bit of a science to it, but you do it a little bit and you get to where you can get pretty good at it real quick. Okay, now to properly bleed this truck out, these older, I call them OBS Chevys, you have to have a computer and run what's called an automated bleed. Right here in the center, automated bleed. We're using a Snap-on Verus, or actually this is a Zeus, but a Verus does it also. Hit automated bleed. Can't have any codes in the system. Continue. Now, put your foot on the brake, and then activate the bleed. Now, I'm not doing that. It's pushing me back. What it's doing is it's running the valves up there in the ABS controller in a specific pattern to work the air out of the system, and it pushes it back towards the master cylinder. If you're dealing with a spongy pedal on one of these trucks and you cannot get it to bleed out normally, this is what you have to do. Unfortunately, some of the cheaper systems might have this feature on them. That's why I go higher priced on this stuff, because code reader is fine, but I have to have functional test for a lot of things. Sorry about the beeping, but you know, you have to have the key on for the computer. This is the end of it. Brakes are a lot better than they were. Normally, I run the system a couple of times. I did it once and then I filmed once. So, yeah. This one had not bled it empty yet, so it should be all right. It would be better if they just had bleeders up there on the ABS, but they don't. So, this is what we have to do. It is what it is. Like, comment, subscribe, hit your little bell notification, share it all around. We'll talk to you later.